Chapter 5. The Experiment. When Michelle and Nathaniel returned from school, Nathaniel's father was in his office. He had just finished making the box to put the ice cream in. "Is this right?" His father showed them the box. They both said it looked just like the box the ice cream man had used that night. After dinner, they all went out to the back of the building and set up the box with the ice cream and the camera with the trigger to set off a flash and click a shot of whoever opens the box. "I am sure it will be a raccoon you'll capture tonight," Michelle's stepdad said. "Don't be surprised if it is a ghost of an early 19th century teenage girl." Nathaniel's stepmom replied, "Like you said before, when conducting a scientific experiment, you don't want to make preconclusions." "I am not making a preconclusion. I am making a hypothesis based on an educated guess. I am open that it may not be a raccoon, although not convinced it is the spirit of a poor girl. It could be a possum, or even a house cat." Michelle's stepdad answered, "I would first believe it is some half-naked homeless man who comes to eat the ice cream, before I would think it is a ghost that does not even have a digestive system." Nathaniel's dad set up the camera. "If that was the case, wouldn't he also take the camera, not just the ice cream?" asked Nathaniel. "Good point," his father acknowledged. "Even a space alien would make more sense than a ghost, since they would at least be biological and would need to eat." Michelle's mom hypothesized. "Or perhaps it's a wandering obese woman who is addicted to ice cream," Nathaniel suggested. They all laughed at their guesses. It was already dark when Nathaniel finished, helping his father with the whole setup. The box was right near the water wheel, and Michelle placed a bowl of vanilla ice cream in the box and latched it. Nathaniel's father placed a trigger on the lid of the box that when something or someone did open it, it would trigger the camera on the tripod to take a flash photo of the box and the ice cream thief. "We should go inside. If it is a raccoon, he or she will not come for the ice cream with us standing around here. As for the ghost, I am not sure if our being here would scare her away or not. To be on the safe side, we should retire back inside for the night. If this little experiment works, we should have a photo of our ice cream eater by morning." That night in his bedroom, Nathaniel was extremely excited about them capturing a picture of the raccoon. He was convinced now that his father was correct. He was no longer afraid to sleep in his own room and was curious to part his shades to check on their experiment. He was, though, still too afraid to open his blinds and look outside at night. As much as he realized his father was correct, having seen those eyes and hearing all the stories about her, his rational mind was still unable to make him brave enough to open the shades. Laying down in his bed, he got ready to sleep. Staring up at his ceiling, he thought about the girls that lived in this building so long ago. He wondered how they slept each evening. Were they so exhausted from working for so many long hours? He questioned if their times in bed were their only joy and happiness, or did they just lie down in bed dreading knowing that they would soon have to labor away for another endless day. Even if they were making money, all their money was being sent home to their parents. Even if they kept their money, they did not have any time to enjoy their young lives. He thought to himself how their lives were not really any different than the slaves of the South of the time. He understood that life on a farm may not have been much better, or even worse, but they still were not free in his opinion. They belonged to their parents and Mr. Cretan. In a way, their traditions and obedience to their parents chained them to the factory floor. Yet, here at the factory, they at least would not feel the pangs of hunger. Here they did have a bed to sleep in every night, and a roof over their heads. For a child of the 21st century, it was clearly not enough. Nathaniel realized, though, that those girls of over 150 years ago did not know computers, smartphones, video games, movies, television, cars, electric appliances, light bulbs, indoor plumbing, central heating, or air conditioning. They grew up in a time when most of the world was still digging, plowing, and doing back-breaking harvesting just to have enough to eat. The more Nathaniel thought about the lives they had, that most people had throughout most of human history, spending 5 days a week in school seemed like a luxury compared to working on a pre-industrial farm or in a factory 6 days a week for 12 hours a day. He could not imagine living in a world where sleep and a meal were the few enjoyments in life. He was sure, though, Mr. Cretan, with all his wealth, did not live such a hard life. The industrialists were in a way the new lords of the land. They did take a gamble investing their money into building factories and creating jobs for millions. Yet, if they were successful, their lives were not nearly as difficult as that of their contemporary American farmers or factory workers. They had servants in the North to do all the labor-intensive work that needed to be done every single day. In the South, on the large plantations, owners had slaves instead of servants to care for them and their manners. In some ways as bad as it seems to modern eyes, it was still an improvement to the lords and kings of Europe. Nathaniel remembered his father telling him how people lived in feudal Europe. The common man was merely a peasant, a serf of the land owned by their lords. At least in early 19th century America, most farmers owned their own lands, and a large class of skilled laborers existed in the nation. They worked for themselves and kept their profits to make a better life for their families. The serfs of feudal Europe worked land that did not even belong to them. Their lords owned the land and the fruits of their labor. When harvest time did come, the lords were first paid in crops as payment for them to have the right to work the lands. The peasant farmer would only have what their lords did not take. If they had a bad harvest, the peasant farmers went hungry, not the nobles or the kings and queens. The American Revolution, his father told him, was the beginning of the end of the concept that one man was of noble birth while another was not. The fact was that ancestors of all those so-called nobles had taken the lands by brute force and clash of arms. Their noble descendants held onto those same lands by the swords and spears of their soldiers, and by the axes or ropes of their executioners. Is why Americans do not bow, his father told him once. We shake hands as equals. We do not believe that any man is better than another. Of course, we were not perfect. In the beginning, we had a very strong burden of racism and slavery. We were and are still not perfect, but we at least moved the world away from thousands of years of most men being the property of a handful of so-called noble elites. Nathaniel was glad he was born in the 21st century. As bad as things may seem, life, for the most part, had never been better. He learned from his father, if we could remain curious, think deeply, and be creative, things will only get better. His father would tell him, throughout most of human history, too many of our problems are rooted in thoughtless emotions, greed, envy, and prejudices. Reason has made our world a much better place. The next morning, Nathaniel went outside with his dad to check to see if their experiment had worked. Michelle was already outside waiting for them. She was wearing her little Red Riding Hood outfit and had her book bag ready to go to school after they checked the camera. The box is open, and the ice cream is gone, she informed them. As Nathaniel approached, he saw that the box had been unlatched, opened, and all the ice cream in the bowl was licked clean. "Were you waiting long?" he asked her. "No, I just got down here a minute or so before you," she replied. Nathaniel's dad was checking out the camera. "Well, it did take a picture last night." The three of them went to the back to the camera to view the LCD screen. It was a clear shot of a raccoon that had just opened the box. His eyes glowed from the flash of the camera. "You were right, Dad. It was a raccoon. How did you know that they could open the box?" Nathaniel asked. "A simple latch like they had on the box. I knew it wouldn't be difficult for a raccoon. I told you they are very clever animals." It made much more sense that raccoons had been eating the ice cream than a ghost. His father replied. He then took the memory card out of the camera. "Does your teacher have a printer in classroom?" "She does." Nathaniel answered. "Here then." His father handed him the flash card. "Have your teacher print out the photo for you. You can show your classmates that it hasn't been a ghost eating ice cream every new moon, just clever raccoons with a sweet tooth." "Thanks, Dad." Nathaniel took the flash card. This should really shock them. For all these generations, they have been afraid of raccoons. At school, Nathaniel asked his teacher if she could print a photo on the flash drive. He explained to her what the picture was. The teacher was very excited to see the photo. As the picture printed out, his classmates gathered around the printer. They were all in awe how Nathaniel's father was able to capture the raccoon opening the famous ice cream box. It was clear to all of them that it was raccoons and not the ghost of her. But what of all those that died in 1918? Tommy Green asked, who usually sat in the back of the classroom quietly. The time when they forgot to put out the ice cream for her. Nathaniel explained to them about the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918. That was just a coincidence that the year they didn't put out the ice cream, the Spanish flu hit that year. One of his other classmates suggested that perhaps the person that was responsible to put out the ice cream didn't, because he had already gotten the Spanish flu. The teacher replied that was a very logical explanation. She also used the computer to look up the Spanish flu to confirm what Nathaniel was saying was true. That the pandemic did hit America that year, and that it had killed more people than the 4 years of World War I. His teacher praised him and gave him extra credit for discovering the truth about the ice cream eater of the old water wheel. She then returned the flash drive after making a few more copies for the other teachers. Many of his classmates patted Nathaniel on the back for a job well done. Some even said they would like to go fishing with him at the river, now that they knew there isn't a ghost of the old water wheel. At lunch break, Nathaniel sat at Michelle's table with her female friends. He showed them all the photo of the raccoon. The girls all giggled and laughed as they passed the photo among themselves. To think we have been afraid all this time of a cute little raccoon. I always knew there wasn't a ghost, Fawn Grant stated with great pride as she slightly jerked her head to throw back her long, silky blonde hair. Nathaniel felt as if her hair fell back in slow motion as her golden locks caught the light. "Oh, yeah, sure you didn't." The other girls sarcastically replied to her. "Never mentioned to me you didn't think there was no ghost," Missy O'Dowell stated. "And I thought I was your best friend." "You are," Fawn assured her red-haired, freckled-faced friend. "I know I told you just recently that I didn't think there was a ghost." "Sure, Fawn. Sure you did." One of the girls disbelieved her. "You were not afraid, as the rest of us." "No, I wasn't." Fawn lifted her head up straight and tossed her hair back again. "Who is she?" Margaret, looking closely at the photo, interrupted the conversation. "Who is who?" The girls all turned their attention to Margaret at the end of the table. "The girl in the photo," Margaret answered, looking up at her classmates. "What girl in the photo?" Nathaniel asked Margaret. "Didn't anyone look closely at this photo?" Margaret asked. "There is a girl in the background standing next to the water wheel." Nathaniel and Michelle both got up from their seats and went to stand behind Margaret, who was still holding the photo. "Here." Margaret pointed out for them a blurry, white figure in the background near the water wheel. "It looks like a girl in some old-fashioned dress." Nathaniel took the photo from Margaret to look more closely at it. She was right. In the background, behind the raccoon in the distance, there seemed to be the figure of a girl in a white dress near the water wheel. Without saying a word, he handed the picture to Michelle, so she too could take a closer look. "Oh my God," Michelle replied, looking at the figure Margaret pointed out to them. "I never even noticed it." Nathaniel said, "None of us did. We were all so happy that was only a raccoon. None of us, except for Margaret, took the time to really examine the photo," stated one of the other girls as Michelle passed the photo around to them. "There is a ghost of a water wheel," Fawn declared as she took her turn to look more closely at the photo. "I knew it." On their way home that day, Nathaniel wanted to go straight to his father to show him the figure in the background of the picture. He was confident that his father could find a logical, reasonable explanation for it. Michelle thought they should first stop to see Nana and Grandpa Miller and get their reaction to the photo. Nathaniel agreed to see the Millers, partially thinking it would be nice to have a piece of pie before going home. They climbed a small hill where the Miller house overlooked the orchard. At the door, Nathaniel remembered to knock 3 times, wait a moment, and then knock twice. The front door of the house slowly opened, and Grandpa Miller peered out at them. "Any monsters?" "No monsters, it is just us, Nathan and Michelle." "Okay, come in quickly. Don't want to let any of those terrible monsters in. Look at them waiting for their chance to strike." Grandpa Miller opened the door wide open for them as he suspiciously eyed the army of perfectly lined-up orchard trees below and the large oak near the house. Closing the front door, Grandpa Miller led them into the living room. All the lights were off. Only the afternoon sun shined through the curtain windows, creating shafts of light in a mostly dark room. "Is Nana Miller in the kitchen?" asked Michelle. "No. She is here with us now," Grandpa Miller replied. "Where?" Nathaniel asked, not seeing her. "I am right here, my dears." They heard Nana Miller clearly say, but they still could not see her. Suddenly Nana Miller stepped out of the shadows as if she materialized from nowhere. "I told you she was here," Grandpa Miller said as he sat down in his chair. "Would you children like some pie?" Nana Miller asked. "Yes, please." Nathaniel quickly replied, feeling his stomach rumbling with excitement to have some of their wonderful pie. "Apple or blueberry?" "Apple, please." Nathaniel responded. "Nothing for me, Mrs. Miller. Thanks, though, for offering." Michelle answered. "Are you sure? The apple pie is fresh out of the oven." Nana tried to persuade her. "I can try a little bit of Nathan's." Michelle confidently stated, "Just an extra fork would be fine." "Hey, I want all of my apple pie," he protested. "Please bring her a piece too, Nana Miller." Seeing that Michelle was disappointed, he didn't want to share his pie with her, he turned to her. "If you can't finish your slice, I will finish it for you." He smiled. She did not. "I want a big slice, please," Grandpa Miller requested. "You should watch your weight, Charles. Not too big a piece." Nana answered him. "Okay, fine, not too big a piece." Mr. Miller grumbled. Nana Miller soon returned with her tray, carrying 4 plates with apple pie and 4 tall glasses of milk. She served everyone and sat in her chair next to her husband across from Nathaniel and Michelle on the couch. A shaft of light from the large bay windows cut between them and the Millers. "So, how can I help you? I have a feeling you didn't come here just for more pie," Nana Miller said, holding her pie plate in her left hand as she took half a fork full of the still steaming apple pie with her right hand. Nathaniel took out the picture, passed it first to Nana Miller, and explained to them about his father's experiment. Nana Miller passed the photo to Charles, who looked at it very carefully. "Looks like your father captured in this picture much more than he planned to," Grandpa Miller stated. "So, it is a picture of her?" asked Nathaniel. "It could be, or it could be nothing at all. Perhaps my eyes are not what they used to be," answered Grandpa Miller. "Growing up, especially in this town near that old factory, I have heard a lot of ghost stories all my life. But even after 3 tours of Vietnam, where I did see much more death than anyone should, I have never actually seen a ghost." "Nor I," added Nana Miller. "We have all grown up hearing the stories, but your photo here is the closest to a ghost I have ever seen too. I am sure your father will have an idea what the figure in that photo is. He seems to be a clever guy," suggested Grandpa Miller. "I agree with Charles. I think your father is the best person to show this picture to. I am also sure he can discover a much more reasonable rationalization for the image than something as strange as the ghost of a teenage girl." Nathaniel felt a bit better after talking to the Millers. Perhaps once again they were just seeing what they wanted to see. A ghost of a girl from nearly a century and a half ago. He too was sure his father could find out what the ghostly image in the picture really was. When they entered Nathaniel's apartment, he called out to his father, who emerged from his office. "What is it, Nathan?" "It's the photo, Dad." Nathaniel handed it to him, and pointed to the figure in the background. His father looked at it puzzled, seeing the ghostly image. "I have to admit, even though it is blurry, it does look like a girl," his father said, turning and heading back into his office. "You have the flash drive with the original picture?" Nathaniel handed it to his father, who sat at his desk, and inserted the flash drive into his computer. His father opened the picture on the flash drive and zoomed into the section of the picture with the white figure. Oddly, the more he zoomed in, the less and less it looked like a person, but just a patch of light. "Look here." His father pointed to the bottom of the figure near the raccoon's tail. The bottom of the figure is not behind the raccoon's tail, but in front of its tail. "What does it mean?" Michelle asked. "The figure is not in the background near the water wheel," Nathaniel's father explained. "It is in front." His father zoomed out the picture again. "Here, that is the cause." His father pointed to the tin hinge he made for the door frame. When the flash went off to catch the raccoon in action, some of the light hit the tin hinge of the box's lid, reflecting back into the camera, causing lens flare. "You mean it is not a spirit of a teenage ghost?" Michelle asked. "No, it is just light shining back onto the lens of the camera. The image you see as a girl is not that different than staring up at clouds on a summer's day and seeing the images of unicorns and floating white elephants. Just another optical illusion like the fire we saw on the 3rd level," Nathaniel stated. "Yes," his father confirmed. Nathaniel looked at Michelle. She shrugged her shoulders and smiled back at him. "Perhaps we really have been listening to too many ghost stories," she said to him. "Yes, perhaps we have. Thanks, Dad. We really got ourselves scared again when Margaret pointed out the figure. It is understandable. At first glance, it looked like a ghost to me too." His father handed the printed photo back to his son. "You can let your classmates know tomorrow that you didn't capture the ghost of the water wheel. You only caught an ice cream-loving raccoon and some lens flare." Both Nathaniel and Michelle slept very well that night. Nathaniel even left his blinds partly opened. It was his first night sleeping in the old factory that he had no fear. The next day at school, Nathaniel brought back the photo and explained the lens flare to his teacher and his classmates. Once he was able to explain it to them, they all saw clearly that it was not a ghost of a girl in the background, just light hitting the tin hinge and bouncing onto the camera lens. On their way home from school that day, they stopped at Nana and Grandpa Miller's to let them know they were correct, that Nathaniel's dad was able to find a reasonable explanation for the ghostly figure in the photo. Nana served them this time peach pie, which was the most delicious either one of them had ever had. It had just a touch of cinnamon, and Nana had put a scoop of vanilla ice cream on top of each of their pieces of pie. Mr. Miller was jealous that she did not give him a scoop of ice cream too. He also noted that his slices of pie seemed to be getting smaller and smaller each time the children came to visit. "The only time I ever get any pie is when you two come by. So be sure to come over every day after school." He winked at them as Nana was returning the empty dishes back to the kitchen. Nathaniel got up and followed Nana into the kitchen. "Mrs. Miller, can I help you do the dishes?" he called out. Even though he was only a few steps behind Nana Miller, there was no one in the kitchen, and all the dishes had already been cleaned. "Nana Miller," he called out again. "In here, my dear." Nana Miller replied from the living room. Nathaniel returned to the living room, finding Mrs. Miller sitting in her chair. "That's strange, I didn't see you walk past me," he stated, re-entering the living room and standing behind Michelle, whom was still sitting on the couch. Michelle stood, sensing Nathaniel was ready to head home. "Thank you once again for the pie, Nana Miller." Nathaniel rubbed his tummy, which was very happy at the moment. Mr. Miller stood and walked them to the door. He whispered to them, "Please remember to come and visit as often as you want. She really likes you too." "We like both of you very much too, Mr. Miller," Michelle answered, giving him a kiss on the cheek. Mr. Miller blushed a little, better than pie," Mr. Miller said before he closed the front door behind them.